Hey guys, Ty here. Hope you're doing well. In this video, I'm going to do a deep dive into the transition from having been a solo creator for over a year, having edited my own videos, into hiring a video editor for my YouTube channel. So we're going to go through what I think is kind of a comprehensive um, plan of attack for anyone who's maybe considering going and hiring your own editor. I'll give you my own experience and take. A lot of this information that I'm going to share has been inspired from my current mentorship program that I'm in with my coach, Tintin Smith, and some of the feedback and best practices they shared in their program about how to outsource an editor. So, this is basically for anyone who is finding themselves editing for extended periods of time throughout the week for all of your YouTube videos. And this was me for a long time. I was spending anywhere from 5 to 15 hours per week editing videos. And I did that for the better part of a year. Um, and it's quite exhausting. So if that's you, then this video is going to be right up your alley. And just really quick before we jump in case you're wondering who I am, if we haven't met before, my name is Ty, and I am a YouTube creator and coach. I've been doing YouTube now for 14 months. I have my own coaching business where I help other newer creators with their YouTube journeys. I also have a community on School. And I was reluctant to hire an editor for so long. And it was primarily to do with the fact that I had no idea how to do it. And I was just intimidated by the process. I didn't want to lose control of how it would look and feel when I was done editing the videos. I didn't want to have to work on someone else's timeline, especially if that person was overseas and there wouldn't be a lot of overlapping working hours. And I didn't want to have to babysit somebody or help orient somebody into my editing style. And then maybe most importantly is I just wasn't I didn't want to pay for it, right? I was being cheap and frugal and had all these other subscriptions and costs with my YouTube channel. And if it was something I could do myself, why would I pay someone else to do it? But my mind has changed on all of these things. So let me know if any of this sounds familiar, because I think a lot of new people probably have some combination or maybe all of these in the back of your mind that's preventing you from moving forward with a video editor. But here's what you should realize is that 5 to 15 hours per week for a year is 576 hours or 24 days of editing in a year. That's like a month. That's crazy to think about. Somebody fact check me on that math because that seems crazy to me. So, in my mind, this is way too much. And this time is better spent elsewhere. And we'll talk about how to think about ROI with respect to the number of days or hours that you're spending. And yeah, once I reframed editing as an opportunity cost, and that's so important, my whole world changed. And this is all thanks again to the mentorship program that I was mentioning earlier. So if you respond yes to any of these questions, I think an editor is something you should consider. So does editing delay your ability to post content? Does it get in the way? Does it make you, if you have a Monday posting schedule and you're too busy editing and you can't get that video out, or you're delaying to Tuesday, delaying to Wednesday? If that's the case, then you need to hire an editor because more content equals more growth. And vidIQ put out a study. This is about a month or two old, where they reviewed over 5 million YouTube channels, and they found that the channels that post the most grow the most. And I think we all know this to be true, but they actually found it in the data. So the more you post, the more you will grow. That is an objective fact on average. Now, if you're spending more time editing than you are actually creating, right? So how many hours do you spend thinking about topics, writing about the topics, filming the topics? Compare those hours to how many hours you're spending editing. And if you're spending way more hours editing than you are in the creation process, then here's my challenge to you. You're not a content creator. You're a video editor because you're spending more time editing than you are creating. So think about that. Do you consider yourself a video editor? Do you watch tutorials on how to become an editor? Do you spend time researching editing tips? If so, then you might be a video editor. And then you need to ask yourself, is that what you want to be? And if the answer is no, then you probably need to hire an editor. Okay. And then the final question is, can you reinvest all of the saved time that an editor would take off your plate into some higher ROI activity, meaning Can you repurpose those hours into trying to make money through your YouTube channel? And if the answer is yes, then you should hire an editor. And we'll talk about ROI, and that means return on investment for anyone who's not clear. Hiring an editor isn't an expense at all. It's actually an investment. It just depends on how you think about it. If you can take the time that you're not editing and spend that time on ways to make money, then the money you make will pay for the editing. And here's just an example. We'll talk about a coach, somebody who provides some sort of consulting service. And maybe this doesn't apply to you necessarily, but I think the principle or the concept here is still valid. So here's the formula. Your return on investment is equal to the hours saved times your hourly rate minus your editor cost. So if you have an hourly rate, let's just say $100. If you were to provide a one-to-one coaching service where you're spending 60 minutes with somebody and you're charging $100, right? That's a nice baseline minimum rate. And if you are spending 5 hours editing every video every week and you hire an editor for $75 a video, then here's your opportunity cost. If you could repurpose those 5 hours into 5 coaching sessions, you would make $500, right? And then if you were to subtract out the editing cost of 75, then your net is 425, right? As opposed to just having $0 and spending 5 hours on editing. So this is a very simple way to think about it. Now, of course, you're not magically just going to book 5 hours of coaching sessions the moment you hire an editor, but all you need to do is book 1 session per week or 1 session per video to pay for that edit. And you're only spending 1 hour with the client for that $100, and you're saving 5 hours of time editing. Do you see how that makes sense? So, even if you don't fill all those 5 hours, the point is that you have capacity. So you can take on more coaching calls in the future, right? These are higher ROI activities, right here. You can create a lead magnet, which can grow your newsletter. You can email your newsletter, right? With all of this saved time, you can build the infrastructure. You can build the lead magnet. You can start crafting nice emails to your subscribers, and then maybe some of those convert into a client, right? So the idea is try to do the things that are going to get you money so that you can then pay for the editor. So you can spend extra time on writing better scripts. And in those scripts, you're including calls to action to join your newsletter or your paid offer. And then it just helps free up all of this like mental bandwidth to focus more on content planning and to just get your mind out of doing this like deeply focused, repetitive, monotonous editing work. So the math is simple. And here's my example right here. My effective hourly rate is about $250 an hour when I work one-to-one with clients. Now, I've actually reduced it to 150 because I spend more time outside of those one-to-one sessions helping out my clients. So I said, let's just say $150 on average, right? And if I'm paying $150 for a video to be edited, but that's saving me 5 to 15 hours a week, then all I need to do is have 1 coaching call per week to pay for that video edit, right? So I'm making $150 for 1 hour of work with a client, and I'm paying $150 for 1 video to be edited, and I do 1 video per week. Therefore, it's a wash. Now, if I have 2 calls per week, 2 coaching calls per week, then I'm making money, right? And the point is, I think right now I'm averaging 3-ish hours per week spent with my clients. So, again, you're not going to fill up every freed up hour, but the point is you have it available and you can work towards higher ROI activities. Okay, so how do you source candidates to become a video editor, right? This is a tricky part that a lot of people get caught up in, and this was another bottleneck for me as well. Like I just didn't know the process. So there are, I think, 2 main ways to do it. You can proactively look for them on third-party platforms like Upwork and Fiverr. And you can look at job descriptions, you can post that you're looking for somebody, or you can find other people's availability. You can filter those candidates. You can start with a paid trial. So this is probably one of the more common ways of finding a freelancer is to go to one of these third-party sites and just review people who are offering the thing that you need help with. The other way to do it is direct outreach and talking to your community. So this is what I did. And, you can tackle this a bunch of different ways. One is if you don't have a big community, like if you don't have a big audience, then this might be a little more challenging. But if you do have creator friends, or if you're part of a community, then you can ask within the community, hey, do you have a referral? Do you have someone that you like working with? What's their rate? Can you connect me with them via email? And then you can start asking questions and building that relationship. But what I did is I basically announced it on my YouTube community wall. So I put out a post. I'll show you that here in a second. I said, hey, I'm looking for an editor. And I had a few people had some interest on it. I pointed them to an application page that I built, which then filtered people out. And then I pointed them to a booking, which again filtered people out. And then finally, I got the chance to review some portfolios, talk to a bunch of people, and then get on some calls with people. So the simple pipeline is this. You announce it that you're looking for an editor, and then you create a filter system. And you can do this a number of different ways. Just depends on how many applicants you get. But all that to say, if you, again, don't have a big network of people to reach out to, you might not get a lot of bites, but you might be surprised, to be honest. I was surprised by how many people were already in my community that were already watching my channel who responded to my outreach. So I'll show you really quick. Here's what I did, just as an example. I have this YouTube community post where I was like, hey, looking for an editor, weekly edits, paid long term, so on and so forth. If you're interested, apply here. And this is a landing page that I built inside of Kit. And I put, I film, you edit, we grow together. And then I put like, who am I? Here's what I'm looking for. And I had ChatGPT help me with all of this copy. So you're not like inventing everything from scratch, right? I talked about our typical workflow, must-haves, compensation and growth. And then if you're interested, apply here. Now this link no longer works, but I'll just show you really quick what that might look like. It was a booking link through Calendly, and Calendly has some good booking options, but they also have good routing options. And what I mean by routing is this right here is a routing form. So it's a basically an application. It's a series of questions that I was asking a would-be editor to kind of screen people to make sure they'd be a good fit for me. Now, the one you're looking at right now is the application for my coaching program. This is not the application for the editor job. I actually deleted that one, but it's the same look and feel. So I'm asking for their name, their contact information. I'm asking them for their portfolio of things that they've worked on. I'm talking about compensation. I'm talking about work philosophy, communication, time zone, all of the things that are important to me. I'm creating questions out of those in here. And then if someone were to apply, they'd have to answer all those questions. And then based on their responses, they would either pass through for me to for them to book a call with me, or they would then get a rejection email basically saying, hey, based on what you've said, I don't think we would be a good fit together. So there's logic built in here. This routing is actually really easy to set up. And then you'll get all of these responses in here, some of whom will be able to book with you and some of whom they won't be able to book. So it's just a way to filter people out and make sure that you're getting the best quality candidates that you want. Honestly, the landing page you can make in really any like platform that can build a landing page like Card, Kit, Notion. You can even do it in like a Google Doc, like what I've got right here. And then you can just link them out to, your booking site like Calendly, for example. And Calendly is pretty inexpensive. So that's basically the workflow, right? Announce, filter. Once you find your top 2 or 3 based on all the filtering you've done, then you're going to move into what I call a paid trial. And this is where you're going to give everybody the ability to edit a video for you, maybe just 1 to 2 minutes. You give them the raw footage, you give them the scope of work, and then you evaluate everyone based on the quality of the work that they give you. And of course, you're going to pay them for it. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. But again, coming back to if you do not have a large community, or if you don't want to like mess around with Fiverr or Upwork, if you don't know Alexis Saranoia, you should. She's a great creator in the YouTube growth space. She has a community on School called the Creator Boost Tribe, and recently she put out a post asking for all video editors in her community to pitch their services. So here is the thread, and as you can see, she's got over 7,000 people in her community. you wouldn't be surprised to know that there's a lot of video editors in here. So people are pitching their services in here, and her community is benefiting. So for anyone in her community that needs to find an editor, all they got to do is come in here and look for somebody. So join her community. It's free. Look at this thread. You can certainly find people, and if there's referrals to be had, I'm sure you can, get a referral in here as well. So that's sort of the high level of how I sourced my candidate. I just put a message out to my community, but of course you can use third-party sites. Okay, so let's talk about the trial period, and then we'll move on from there. So yeah, don't commit to an editor blindly. Use a short, structured trial to make sure that the process is fair for both sides and that everyone's getting an equal shot. Obviously, you want to look at a portfolio to evaluate the quality of their work. If the style of editing matches what you're trying to do for your own videos, and it would help when you're giving the editor the paid trial to give them some inspiration, like give them some North Star to shoot toward. Tell them what you want with your edit. But make sure whatever direction you give to all of the people in the paid trial so that everyone has an equal shot. 1 to 2 minutes of raw footage you give them, and you give them the style and the details of how you want it. And then I would say, as far as the payment goes, whatever the normal whatever the normal rate would be for that video, maybe like a third of that is what you would do in the paid trial, just on average, right? Because they're only editing a minute or two. They're not editing a full video. And then evaluate more than just the polish. Look at the turnaround time. Did they meet the agreed window for turnaround? Communication, were they clear and responsive? Were they reliable and follow instructions? And did they add any unique flair, creativity to the project? And then you're going to compare them side by side. And then based on who you like in the paid trial, then at that point you would book a call with them, talk with them more, review the statement of work, and just make sure you're aligned. Make sure you've got good communication. Make sure you get a good vibe from them and that you don't feel like they might be someone that might take advantage of you. So, yeah, and at that point you can start talking about the statement of work. And so basically what I did, I kept my process simple. I had a few conversations, looked at the portfolios, and because I already knew the person, because they were in my community, I felt confident moving forward with them. I already had a relationship with them. And so if you're starting from scratch, I think a short paid trial is worth doing. And that way you're not just like jumping from editor to editor to editor trying to find somebody that works well with you. All right, so let's talk about cost, right? Because this is one of the biggest factors when you're thinking about hiring somebody is what should you be paying? And I think that answer is going to vary based on really the location and geography and the skill level of the person that you want to work with. So before hiring, it's important to understand the range of rates that you're going to see in the market. And again, it depends on project complexity and I don't know, the experience level of the person that you're looking at. But there are going to be different rates depending on where that person is located. So if I'm calling them offshore because I'm here in the US. So anyone outside of the US I'm considering offshore. Asia, Latin America, Eastern European, these might have lower fees associated with video editing. So if you're working with somebody and it's going to be on a per hourly rate, you might see the very lower end, $10 to $25. If you're looking at flat fees, which I recommend, $50 to $100 per video for somebody that's going to be halfway decent, right? The trade-off though is that communication and time zone can be a challenge, right? You might not have a lot of overlapping hours with the person, and that could potentially delay uploads or delay things getting done in a timely manner. So keep that in mind, because if you end up working with somebody who's US based or North American based, then you have the added benefit of more overlapping hours, but you're going to pay a premium for that. So in the US, $150 to $500 per video, depending on the B-roll, colors, graphics, audio treatment. But again, faster communication and maybe simpler cultural alignment. And it'll be easier to communicate with people who there's maybe less of a language barrier when you're trying to explain things, right? So just keep that in mind as well. And then, of course, at the very high end, I mean, you can get upwards 500 to 1,000, even several $1,000s per video. But we're not really interested in this as folks who are brand new to editing. So I would say don't just anchor to the cheapest person. Figure out what's included, number of revisions, turnaround, assets, audio, color grading, and compare on value, not just price. Okay. So for me, what I've settled on, and this is me working with my very first editor, I'm paying $150 per video. My editor is based in the US. They're an hour ahead of me time zone wise, so we have a ton of overlap. Um, and we're working with one video per week. There's upside of potentially two if things are working well. We've agreed on monthly invoicing through Zelle. And the reason I made this hiring decision was because I already had an established relationship with this person in my school community, and I already knew their channel and their body of work. They've had several years of freelance editing and 15 years in a creative role. And then again, US based, tons of overlap. And then I think most important is alignment with my business and my channel. They already knew my channel because they've been following me for some time. They knew who my audience was. So they knew the editing style that my audience might enjoy. And then, of course, when we had our conversation, there was a lot of talk about, I don't want this to be a transactional relationship. I want it to be a business development relationship. So I'm really looking for somebody who wants to grow their business alongside my own. So at the end of the day, the ROI lens for me isn't just save time. It's editing less, and that's going to free me up to focus on writing, scripting, ideation, and then also serving my clients better, which is so important because if I can do right by my clients, that might mean return clients, that might mean referrals and word of mouth or good testimonials. And so if I'm saving 5 to 15 hours per week and putting that back into my client relationships, that's all the more better for growing the revenue and bringing back that money into the business that I would be spending on those videos. So, in terms of the agreement, once you find somebody that you like and you start working on the statement of work, um, you probably do need to get something written down. It's going to serve both sides equally, right? You want protections for both of you. You don't want miscommunications. You want things clearly laid out. And it should cover really all of the essentials. And of course, don't let this bog you down because ChatGPT can help with drafting this document. I'll show you mine here in a second. ChatGPT basically wrote the whole thing, and then me and my editor got on a call together and reviewed it and kind of fine-tuned everything. So within the scope of work, you want to be explicit about what's included, who's doing what, roles and responsibilities, what the deliverables are, the time frames, how you're going to work together, right? Who's providing the scripts, the footage, the assets, how the files will be transferred, the turnaround time, the number of revisions, and then what happens if you need multiple revisions. Of course, the compensation is going to be really important, payment method, due dates for payment, ownership, termination if either party wants to terminate the agreement. That should be explicitly outlined. And then future reviews, things like that. Like how often, at what interval will you review the relationship and maybe add or subtract from it? Okay. Now, for my statement of work, and I'll pull it up here in a second, we just landed on, I was going to provide the raw footage and they were going to provide the deliverable. We may or may not work on thumbnails at a later date. For now, I'm still doing my own thumbnails, but that would be an added cost if my editor decided to do my thumbnails. I'd provide the scripts. I provide a Loom video for context, the raw footage, any assets that I think would be needed. And then the editor is going to assemble and upload the first draft to a platform called Frame.io. And then I go into Frame.io and I provide the first round of revisions. Now, they have a 5 to 7 business day turnaround from when I first upload everything for them to work on. And then once they do their revisions, I have a 24-hour window to go in, provide all of my revisions in a single pass, let them know the revisions are done, and then they'll go in, work on creating those revisions in the project, and then they're going to export the final copy, put it in our Google Drive. I will grab it and then upload it to YouTube. So that's how we're working together. Here's what our statement of work looks like. Again, scope of work, responsibilities from both sides, workflow and timelines, turnaround time, compensation, confidentiality and ownership, terms and review, and then signature. So pretty straightforward, pretty basic, but it's a great document to have because if there's any confusion on anything, we can always come back to that and be like, oh yeah, we agreed to this when we first got together. So that is the statement of work. And then finally, we're going to get to workflows that scale. So hiring an editor at first might feel like there's a lot of friction, but in the end, this is going to save so much time by relieving a lot of bottlenecks. So the main thing to consider here is developing a system that both you and your editor feel good about, that is simple to understand, and that's very repeatable week to week so that you're not guessing about what the other party's responsibilities are. So when it comes to storage and organization, you're going to want to use some kind of cloud hosting service. I use Google Drive, but there are other options like Dropbox, OneDrive, Frame.io, things like that. It's always a good idea to have a physical backup. I should say a backup on like a local machine. So like on my MacBook, having an actual backup of all of the raw footage and assets and things like that. That way, if something happens to the shared drive, we have that backup. And then sticking to a consistent file and folder structure, and I'll show you what our shared Google Drive looks like here in a second. Um, so basically per project, right, we're going to include the raw camera and audio files. I'm going to provide the script or the outline. And if there's a shot list, that's important to know as well. And I'll clearly annotate within the document what's going where. This way, when he gets it, there's no confusion as to what is going to be on screen at any given point in time. If I'm sourcing any B-roll myself, maybe I'm taking B-roll of myself, or I'm taking a screen grab of something that I'm reviewing. That's obviously going to be sourced by me, and then I would include that when I upload all the raw files. But if it's more generic B-roll stuff that the editor can source, I'll make sure to call that out also in the script. So the final thing would be providing a short video to the editor, basically saying, here's the scope of the project, here's the script with all of the stuff in it, here's all the raw footage, but here's what I want you to think about as you're editing. Here's kind of like the inspiration, here's the feeling, here's kind of what I want this thing to look and sound like. And so you're just giving them a little bit more context over a video message, which is easier to explain than through like a text message. And then as far as communication goes, what's the best medium for you guys to be going back and forth? For me, it's going to be school, because my editor is in my school community and I'm in there all the time. So I get to DM back and forth with them. Oftentimes in the script document itself, that lives in a Google Doc, and I can simply tag them, and then that gets sent to their email. They can come in and see what I'm asking about. And then when I'm working in Frame.io, when he gives me the first revision, I'll show you that here in a second. I get to go through the whole project and timestamp different pieces of feedback, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So you just want to make sure whatever platforms you and your editor agree upon, it's going to be easy to use, it's going to be pretty seamless, and you might want to consolidate the majority of your communication to one single platform so that you're not having to check 2 or 3 different places for input and feedback. Okay. So, um, you're going to also want to work with your editor on what the technical requirements or guidelines are for any of the footage that you're shooting. In some cases, they may want you to shoot at a certain bit rate or in a certain color format. In my case, we're going to be shooting an S-Log at 10-bit, but it's just going to depend on your editor and how they prefer to do their edit. Again, if you're working with someone really new or basic, you might not be getting this advanced, but just things to think about, right? You're going to want to make sure you're aligned on the frame rate and the resolution. And then, of course, if there's any music licensing, things like that need to get hashed out as well. Okay, so here's how I did mine. Like I mentioned, I used Google Drive, and we have basically one folder that we work in per project. I'll show you that in a second. I'm including all the raw footage and the color-coded script, and I'll show you that here in a second. And then, of course, the Loom message and any pre-sourced assets. We use DMs in school, video messages in school if we need to, Loom for video walkthroughs, and then Frame.io for revisions. So here's what our Google Drive looks like. It's super simple. There's 4 folders in it. The Ready to Edit folder has all of the projects in it. So these are all labeled with a number. This is the number of videos that I've done. So this is like my 95th video. And then I have the title. So this is like number 96. This is the title. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating these folders and I'm adding in the B-roll. And these are all the different B-roll sections. Now, in some cases, he will add in sorry, I say B-roll, I meant A-roll. So in a lot of cases, it's talking head footage or it's screen recording footage with me on screen. And so this is all the raw stuff in here. And then if there's any B-roll I'm providing, I'm also including that in here as well. And then if he is providing B-roll, he's including it in here as well. And then this is the big one. This is where all of like everything comes together. This is the script document. So this is a document that I own and maintain. I put the video number, the publish date. Here is the Loom video message I created to give him context on it. It's only a few minutes, so it's short and sweet. And then I put in anything else that I need to understand for this project. So, like, what's the big idea? Of course, the script is all the way down here. And then I put any inspiration videos that I found that inspired me to want to make this video. So, also, I will include any editing references. So, if there's a video out there on YouTube that has really good editing. And I'm like, man, I really love this editing style. I would love for my editor to try and model or emulate some of it. I'll include that in here and I will draw attention to it and say, hey, I really like what they did at 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Can you do that for our title screen at the 30-second mark in my video, right? So just ways of getting visual inspiration. And then the color legend is really, really important. This is going to help the editor understand exactly what needs to be on screen at any given point in time. Now, I'm going to give you my walk on this really quick here, but also my editor has his own dedicated YouTube video walking through this process. So I'll share that in the document as well. But basically, in my mind, there's really like 4 different types of visuals in a YouTube video, at least for my style. There's either a talking head, which is essentially just me straight talking to camera with nothing else. There's going to be a voiceover, which is me talking, but I won't be on screen. There'll be some sort of text on screen. Maybe it's a caption, maybe it's a title screen, something like that. And then there's going to be B-roll. B-roll is going to be not me on screen and maybe not text on screen, but maybe just some other movie or image element on screen that is, adding to the overall narrative. And then finally, there's like a graphic section, and this might be a title screen. It might be more captioning, and that needs to get more defined within the script itself. So in my mind, there's going to be really 4 colors that I'm highlighting every single piece of script with so that the editor knows exactly what to do. So in this particular video, this whole section that I've just highlighted in blue, it's color coded in yellow, which means this video is going to open with talking head, with me direct to camera. So that's the first thing people will see. But then we're going to transition into this section here, which is going to be more of like a title screen with text on it. And then I even put right here, can this be somewhat of a title screen with a typewriter style text coming in, right? So that's giving him a bit of direction. This is my whole opening section, my hook for my video. And then when I get into section 2, again, transitioning back into talking head, transitioning here into B-roll. And then in this case, I am providing him the actual B-roll to use. And in this case, it is a PDF document. It's like a research paper that I came up with. And I'm basically giving him a little bit of instruction on how it might look and feel as I'm talking in this section. This section here is caption, right? Because green is caption. So basically, I'm still talking, but it's just text on the screen. So both of these lines are caption. This line is going to be more of a title screen, similar to the one that we already did. And as you can see, the more you go through the script, the more you see all of these colors. And this gives the editor a really clear idea of what needs to be on screen at any given point in time. Now, you're probably thinking, Jesus, that's a lot of color coding. And that's a lot of like forethought. It's a lot of pre-work to be done. Wouldn't it just be easier to record everything straight to camera and then figure out what needs to be B-roll, caption, title screen during the edit? And maybe, but here's my thought process on this. If you read out your full script and you try to deliver everything to camera word for word, it's going to take a long time because you got to memorize your lines, you got to deliver, memorize, deliver, and that sucks. And I'm terrible at this. This takes me forever to do. So if I in advance figure out which portions are going to be B-roll and which portions are going to be caption and which portions are going to be talking head, what I find, maybe a third of the lines are actually talking head. So these are the only lines I need to memorize and deliver to camera. This one right here, I can just read off the page, deliver right to the microphone without having to look at the camera. Same thing with this one. I can read this entire line, just reading right off the page and talking right into the microphone. So I'll screw up far less because I'm actually reading off the page versus trying to memorize something. So if only a third or a half of the words that you're delivering are direct to camera, you're saving yourself so much frustration and time, and you're also making the filming process smoother, and you're making the editing process so much more smooth as well. So I show you all of this because, yeah, there's some complexity here. There's some thought and intention that has to go into your script and how you're thinking about the video. But the more thought you put into the pre-production process, better the final result will be. You're going to get better at writing. You're going to get better at thinking about sourcing B-roll or thinking about the pacing of your video. And your editor is going to have a much simpler time understanding what you want your video to look like. So this is why we settled on this format, and it just makes things so much easier. So that's essentially what we're doing now in terms of how I get him everything he needs for him to have a very simple editing session. So here's his video. I'll obviously you guys will have access to this document, and he goes through this in a lot more detail, showing you exactly how this works. But I love it. I love this process. Okay, let's move on to the revisions step. So revisions are where things can go sideways. If you're not, uh, if you're overly particular, um, and you don't have an understanding of what's possible, you might be asking for too much. And so, depending on the experience level of your editor, or how much you're paying, or how much you've agreed on in terms of complexity in your statement of work, you just have to be mindful that they can't magically make everything perfect, right? So, you have to understand their capabilities, their limitations, how long things take, and you have to be respectful of that. Um, and that's going to take some time to learn and to develop. And that's the beauty of having a long-term relationship with an editor is you start to get to know their capabilities, and then you get to operate within those confines. And then, of course, you can provide them with things that you like, and then they can work towards bringing those to fruition in your videos. So obviously, you want to make sure that once you get that first round of revision, you are looking at the whole thing, start to finish, and you're providing all of your feedback in one go. You're not giving them 60% of the feedback, having them make those adjustments, and then giving them the other 40%. You want to give them everything at once. This is at least my best practice, what I suggest doing. Um, Agree on how many revisions. In my case, we're doing one revision. And the benefit of one revision is like you're just not constantly going back and forth, and you're not delaying. And at the end of the day, this is about momentum, not perfection. You just want to get these reps in and get the videos posted. As I mentioned earlier, the more videos you have posted, the better your chances of growth. Even if the final copy that you get back after the first round of revision isn't perfect, that's okay, right? Just keep in mind what they didn't get right, and then make sure the next time around when you're doing your first round revisions, you're calling out exactly what you want. So batch all your notes, do it all in one go. Make sure you're using timestamps so that they know exactly which section needs to get the revision. Stay decisive. Like, don't be wishy-washy. That's something that your editor can't read your mind. So you really need to be firm, decisive, authoritative about the feedback that you're giving. And again, allow for a learning curve. It's going to take you probably several months to feel each other out, to get to know and anticipate each other's needs. So I recommend using Frame.io. I'll show you that here in a second. It's a great platform for doing the revisions. I leave timestamp comments, and I try to do it within 24 hours. And the reason you want a 24-hour turnaround is if they get their first draft done and it just sits there for like 3 or 4 days, by the time you give them the revisions, that's 3 or 4 days where they're detached from that project, and they're probably like, well, they're just not as close to it. And so they don't have like, they're not in the flow of that project. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Once I give that first round of feedback, they go in and make all the adjustments. They then dump the final version back into Google Drive in our deliverables folder. And then all I do is pull it out, upload it to YouTube. So yeah, one included round keeps momentum extra high. Extra rounds can be done, but you're probably going to pay more for those. So here's what our Frame.io dashboard looks like. Let me pop out here. So far, we've got these two videos. This was the first one. This was the second one. You can pop into each one of these projects, and down here at the bottom, you can kind of see the timeline. Every time you see one of my like profile pictures right here, this is me leaving a comment. Now, this doesn't mean like these are all screw ups or errors, right? A lot of these are me being like, yes, I love what you did here. Like, this is excellent, right? Because part of the feedback process isn't just pointing out the things that you want fixed. It's pointing out the things that you really like as well, because that goes a long way in them understanding your preferences. So also call out what's working well. If you see an animation or a graphic or a cut, you're like, yeah, that's dope. I love that. That's good feedback for them to be able to do it in future videos. All of these comments get timestamped, and then all of them show up here on the right side. As he comes in and takes a look and completes them, there'll be a little checkbox, and you can see read by one person. So you just gotta be really detailed. You gotta be really descriptive. If there's source inspiration, include that, and that way they know exactly what you're needing. So I recommend Frame.io. It's a great dashboard to work in, very easy, very simple for you and your editor to partner. Okay, so that's all the logistics. Let's talk about what changes after you hire an editor, because there's both benefits and headaches. And I wanna contrast both of those, but I also wanna press on the fact that there are net benefits at the end of the day. So it doesn't just save time, right? It changes how you create. It shifts. There's positive shifts. There's negative shifts, but it usually almost always works out in the end. We talked about the ROI and the monetization or the monetary benefits above. So here are the benefits: more time for high value work. Editing your own videos is low value work. Okay. You can focus on scripting, content planning, and audience engagement. Faster publishing cadence when editing no longer bottlenecks production, and you get fresh creative input. You know, you might have your own style editing your own videos now, but you might also be putting yourself in a box, and you might not be thinking more creatively about how your videos could look and feel. And you're reducing burnout from not juggling so many different tasks, right? You're creating an area of expertise for yourself and you're offloading an area of expertise for somebody else. Now, the headaches early on is that there is a learning curve. You have to work with your editor to figure out style and workflow. You have to come to terms with all of the stuff that I've talked to you about in today's video. There may be communication gaps. There may be non-overlapping hours where you need to get something done and it's like midnight for your editor, right? So also, if you're not super clear, if you're not really good at describing what you want, that might cause a little bit of a headache. But the more you try and think about what you want in your videos and do it in this scripting process, the better you will get at figuring out how you want things to look and feel. And then, of course, there's letting go of control, especially if you're picky about details. Costs can add up, right? If you're brand new and not making any money, or if you're just miles away from making money, yes, you can go into a hole paying for an editor. But I would say even early on, if you start paying for an editor, 50, 75 bucks a video, even for a full year without making any money, you're still probably producing more content and you're probably still growing more quickly than other people who are doing all of the editing themselves. So you're expediting the eventual monetization, and then you will make that money back in time. So like I said, yeah, you might not see an immediate ROI. Even if it is delayed, it is perfectly okay and it's going to be worth it. So here are your net benefits. Even with the friction, the trade-off is usually positive. The time and mental energy gained outweigh the frustrations, especially as your editor learns your style. And then over time, the revisions will shrink because you'll start to anticipate each other. Things will become more quick. And as your focus shifts to the parts of YouTube that drive more growth. And then here's what's often overlooked. As your channel grows, you start earning more money through coaching, through your product, your digital course, your AdSense. If your editor's costs stay fixed, but your channel is growing, the ROI expands because now you're making more and more money every month, but their costs are fixed potentially. So you have to think about the long term. In 3 years, how much money could you be making on YouTube? And do you want to be spending 24 days a year editing videos for the next three years? Probably not. So for me, my personal shifts, more focus on writing, faster filming with less pressure. The actual act of filming is a lot easier, less decision fatigue. And this is forcing me to be more intentional about my content calendar and also researching higher interest topics, right? Because I don't want to give my editor some, I don't know, BS video that's not going to get any views. If I'm going to pay 150 bucks for an edit, I kind of want to recoup that money as quickly as possible by getting a topic out there that has a potential for high interest and virality, right? Because that's going to earn me money back on AdSense. It's going to earn me money back on coaching calls, things like that. So it forces you to be more intentional with your topic ideation. And then lastly, I put in here a bit of a creator FAQ. So like common asked questions, how much direction should you give an editor? And I think it's going to depend on you and them. I would say it should be a balance between what you want and also letting them exercise their creativity. Do you need to supply your own B-roll? I think in some cases, absolutely, depending on the type of B-roll that you're going to be providing them. In other cases, they can provide it if it's more generic in nature. You should definitely talk about music licensing if that's something you want in your videos. Will you lose creative control if you hand off editing? Again, this comes back to like how much direction do you want to give them versus how much creative freedom do you want them to have? Normal turnaround times, again, something you'd want to address with them, but I think 3 to 7 business days is pretty normal. What happens if you don't like the edit? Then, you have to give a lot of feedback and direction, and maybe you get 1 or 2 rounds in. And if you're still not happy, then you need to move on. And then, um, is it better to pay per video, hourly, or retainer? I think per video is probably good, although there are other options you can explore. And then does hiring an editor automatically mean more views? No, it doesn't. You actually, the topics, the titles, the thumbnails are the things that carry the majority of a video's viewership. The edit is just what keeps people, I would say, more interested in watching throughout. So you don't need a complex operation, but you do need a clear offer. You need a simple workflow, a trial with your editor, and the rest is just reps and getting better at this process in time as you go. So I know this was a bit of a long one, and I know I probably rambled at certain parts here, but let me know what you guys think. If you have questions, comments, feedback, if this is helpful, again, this document will be in the description of this video. Be sure and grab it. And with that, I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.